Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome in to another episode of The Lager Line, served to you as always courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carbach Brewing. I'm your host, Ben Dubose, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire and contributor to Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets. On today's show, again, we're joined by now our new co-host and producer, Paolo Alves, who you should follow on Twitter at Paolo Alves NBA. Paolo, how's life with the Astros up 2-0 on the Yankees in the ALCS?
It's good. It'll be a lot better in 3 days when they're up 4-0.
Jeremy Pena, the postseason god.
Yes, the faithful shall be rewarded, man. He's everything. He's everything I thought he'd be, and it's been consistent. It wasn't like one big moment. It's been a few big moments so far.
Absolutely. He's been, honestly, their most steady postseason bat. Even Yordan Alvarez has did of late, but Jeremy Pena is successful throughout the postseason and continues to be astonishingly good on the defensive side as well. Anyway, as for the NBA and basketball, which is why we do this podcast, our guest today is one of the more distinguished national voices in NBA media. It's Matt Moore of the Action Network, and you probably know him best as HP Basketball on Twitter, where you either love him or these days, if you're on Rockets Twitter, you may hate him. Matt, thanks for taking the time. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on. I always appreciate talking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this, and we're going to be talking mostly about Jalen Green on this episode, and specifically the chaos that you unexpectedly found yourself in after the podcast segment you recorded last week on Locked On NBA regarding Jalen and whether he's going to turn into an impactful winning player. We are going to get into that, but before we do, I want to lead off by touching on a couple of the topics of the week here in Houston. And I'll start you with the Kevin Porter Jr. contract extension. I know you've had your reservations about KPJ over the years, especially when it comes to KPJ as a point guard, but this is also an extremely team-friendly deal that Rafael Stone negotiated with only 1 year, $15.9 million guaranteed, and there's also a ton of clear financial incentives to keep him on the straight and narrow. Matt, what are your general impressions of the deal they put together for KPJ and what it means moving forward?
So I read KPJ extended, and I'm like, oh no, what have you done? And then I read the terms of it, and I'm like, oh man, what a great deal. Like, this is like a perfect opportunity for both sides, right? Where KPJ gets to prove it. He gets to back up all the talk. If he can be the teammate that optimists want to say that he can be, if he can be the player that optimists say that he can be, then he gets 4 years and a great deal of money. The way it's structured makes it extremely easy to trade. Like, this is going to be one of the most easily tradable contracts in the NBA. And that helps from a number of perspectives, not only if things go sideways with KPJ, but also if the Rockets were to find themselves in the lottery and they were to win that lottery once again, and they find themselves with the opportunity to draft Scoot Henderson, and you're like, oh boy, don't know if we can have Scoot Henderson and Jalen Green and KPJ. Like, that's a lot of mouths to feed in terms of usage with the ball. You know, you're on a friendly contract with a player that's probably rehabbed his value a little bit, and he can find a pretty good spot. You can find a good spot for him, get good return, and transition to that next phase. The worst case scenarios are covered under the circumstances of this deal. The best case scenarios are covered under the circumstances of this deal. So honestly, I'm really impressed that Rafael Stone got it done. I'm really impressed that KPJ was willing to agree to it, just from I always like it when guys are at least able to take some accountability for who they've been in their careers and be like, no, like, I want to prove it. So good for both sides. Think it's a win. Think it's as low as I am on I'll say this. I was so low on KPJ. And then I did like the offseason work and was like, guy can shoot. Like, he's just an incredible shooter. Show some upside in creation from time to time. So I think that there's a lot of upside here for the deal, both for the Rockets and for KPJ, and there's very little downside as far as the Rockets go. You got to love the deal.
Yeah, and I think it covers a little bit of what has been, I'll say, under talk on Rockets Twitter is, even if he doesn't hit what some people think his ceiling is, even if he doesn't, if he doesn't become your starting point guard, if he's shooting as well as he was last season, as a catch and shoot threat, with his length and with his ability to move his feet, at the worst case scenario, that's not the worst case because he could fall out of the league, but if he stays in the league, at the worst case scenario, that's a 3-and-D wing. He's 6'5", I think, has a pretty good
6'6"
wingspan.
listed.
Yeah, so 6'8", even better. So that plus shooting keeps you in the NBA. And I think the guarantee for this contract is $15 million, close to 16, and the rest of it is incentives each year besides the non-guarantees. That, by the time that contract kicks in, which is next season, and then going forwards with that, that's role player money as the cap continues to increase. From this year to next year, the cap is projected to increase 12 million alone, let alone, and this is not counting on any TV deals, it's not counting any cap smoothing, just from what it is right now. And so I'm really surprised that KPJ didn't bet on himself. But I'm glad he didn't, because I love KPJ, but above everything, I'm a Rockets fan, and so good deal for the Rockets, a good deal for me. That being said, and talking about something else that happened on the first game of the season that had Rockets in a little bit of an uproar, Alperen Sengun did not start the game. Bruno Fernando, the guy that was on a two-way deal, that was a throw-in when they traded Daniel Theis to Boston, earned himself a two-way deal into a guaranteed, the Hinkie special, and now he's starting the game instead of Alperen Sengun. And I know a lot of people, me and myself included, expected him to play 15 minutes a night tops. Truth is, I think he played about as many minutes as Sengun did. So how do you feel about that choice by the coaching staff?
I'm a Bruno guy, so I'm like one of the 5 people on the planet that have watched him and been impressed with him, and then looked at the numbers and been like, you know what, his actual numbers across various stops are pretty good. Like, there's a lot of promising stuff there. And honestly, like in that opener, right? Like you get 25 minutes from him in 7-9-7. That's probably a high outcome performance from him with 2 blocks, right? Like that's a high performance outcome, but it actually wasn't that bad. Like only a -1 in the box score, like pretty good. So like the move worked out in that one singular game. I kind of wondered last year, and I talked about this with Ben, was like, why is Alperen not playing more later in that season? Like the season was lost, you're still losing. Even if you think he's bad, that helps your draft stock, and it gets him more opportunities to play. And so now we're into this situation, and like I just have to wonder. Sometimes these dynamics, I will say this, fans and media, both of us together, have zero idea what goes on in practice. None. We got no idea what goes on. They hide it so completely. If you ask around and you know people, you can find out some stuff. Like I haven't heard anything. But I will say that like you put these facts in front of me, and my assumption is that Silas, for whatever reason, does not vibe with Sengun, does not believe in Sengun, does not like have a confidence thing. Because it'd be one thing if there were like small adjustments, or okay, we're not going to play him as much as Rockets Twitter wants. But to go so far as to not start him and then play him less than Bruno, that is such a drastic move the other way for a guy that was talked about as being the offensive hub, that was going to be like the center point of the offense, that hasn't really done, that looked good in Eurobasket, that hasn't, to anyone's knowledge, hasn't done anything to warrant it. Like this looks like a doghouse situation. If it's not, it seems like a galaxy brain situation where it's like, oh, what if we did this to help the bench unit or whatever else, when that bench unit was wretched last year. Like the bench unit was truly awful. So I have a lot of questions about this. I'm curious to see kind of how it goes. Again, I like Bruno. I was glad that they picked him up on the 2-way. I thought that was a good deal. But to go this is such a drastic measure. It's hard for me to kind of get into a mindset of where this is coming from.
So let me tell you what I've found out from poking around the organization and talking to some people this week. I think the minutes distribution in Atlanta was a bit of an outlier because, as you said, Bruno was at the high end of his expected performance, the 7, 9, and 7, no turnovers. The way it was explained to me when it looked like they were going to make this choice was that honestly, Bruno would probably average somewhere in like the 12 to 16 minutes per game range, Sengun closer to 25, And then it just so happened that Bruno played well in Atlanta. Sengun, he did score, but he had the 6 turnovers in 22 minutes, which really played a big role in why they couldn't get over the hump in that game. Would you be able to get more sense out of it if the minutes distribution is closer to the way it was described to me? Something in the range of 25 for Sengun, 12 to 15 for Bruno, and the rest for perhaps Jabari Smith as a small ball 5.
It still seems like a very weird distribution. Like, right? Like, okay, but why? Like, why are you not just in on Sengun? Like, there's a reason Rockets Twitter likes him so much. Like, it's obvious. I liked him more after watching him, even though there's a lot of stuff offensively that I thought like he's overstated at. I don't think he's Sabonis or Jokic. I don't know that he'll ever be Sabonis or Jokic because of a lot of his timing on things. He's not as far ahead of the defense as those guys were right off the bat. He's still really good. There's still so many tools and skills there. And you're not in a position where it's one thing if you're dealing with a veteran, right? Like you've got a long-term veteran center. Like Capella is still around, right? And you're transitioning out of Capella. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's Bruno Fernando. Like, what are we doing? I like the Jabari Smith small ball 5 option. It's good to always have like multiple looks that you can throw at teams and see which of these lineups kind of work. You're not going to want to play Jabari Smith full-time at 5. And you're eventually going to want Sengun to be a big part of the offense. So for me, I'm still kind of like, you know, what is the dynamic here? This seems very, and I've seen this from coaches before, of just they are dead set on a position about a player, and that influences things greatly. And I'm really curious to see how this plays out. And honestly, and like you would know a lot more about this, Ben, like what's the front office's position? Because this seems like the kind of thing that can cause tension if the front office is like, we drafted this guy, we believed in this guy, we gave up assets to get this guy, he's looked good, what are we doing? And the coaching staff is like, I don't think this is the best way for me to win games, which keeps my job. To me, this looks like it's not a fire, right? It's not a red alarm. It's just let's keep an eye on how this develops, because it's definitely weird from where we're at right now.
Yeah, one thing I will say about the investment costs, sometimes I think people on Rockets Twitter overstate it. He was a mid-first round pick. They gave up 2 heavily protected future firsts to get him.
Sure.
A lot of times people act like that he was a top 5 pick. And there was one quote in some interview somewhere where I think Stone alluded to him being like 6th on their board, but lots of teams say something like that. I think by and large, people overstate the extent of the prospect that the Rockets see him as. So I don't think there's a huge split, or at least not the massive split between Stone and Silas that you might be trying to read into there. The one thing I will say that's interesting to me, when this was first posed to me a couple of days before they announced it, one of the things that I was wondering about was how Sengun would take it himself. Because he said on media day, and this was after all off season, ever since they traded Christian Wood, the talk was you traded Christian Wood to open up a starting spot for Alperen Sengun, more minutes. Sengun said on media day, obviously I'm going to start this season. How is he going to take it? But Sengun actually seems to be more happy with it, because this way he gets more touches, because he's typically only playing with one of KPJ and Jalen Green, as opposed to both when he's in those starting units at the first 6 minutes of the first and third quarters. So does it give you any peace of mind, or does it raise your eyebrow at all that Sengun oddly appears okay with this, at least in his interviews? Because for me, you know, the big question I had initially when it was posed to me was, is Sengun going to take this as a slight? Is his development going to be stunted because he's just not in the right frame of mind, because he feels that the coaching staff, the front office, whoever it is, doesn't trust him? But from what I can tell, Sengun actually appears to be on board with this. Does that strike you as odd in any way, Matt?
I'm going to respond to your question with a question, annoyingly, because I think you understand the team, and you're closer to the team day by day than I'm going to be. So Ben, based off of Alpy's kind of approach to everything, now I think a lot of European players look at these things differently. Mm-hmm. Nikola Jokic, when it was him and Yusuf Nurkic, and they were trying to start both of them, and it was so bad. Like Nikola Jokic said, "Put me on the bench." Like he volunteered that.
I didn't realize that.
Imagine in 2022 starting Yusuf Nurkic over Nikola Jokic. So I think there is a very team first, different type of dynamic, and I think starting is way more of an American cultural value in basketball than it might be overseas. It depends, I think, on the country, because to say like overseas is a very broad term. But I think that might be part of the dynamic. But I'll just ask you, like, does Alperen strike you as the kind of guy that's going to be like gunning for it and like, you know, needs his minutes and like very, because to me he strikes me as a guy that is very much like good with whatever is best for the team, and that can honestly hurt you in the NBA because you got to be a little selfish at times.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It just struck me as an interesting juxtaposition because he did talk about that starting role on media day. I went back and looked at the interview to make sure I wasn't crazy, and I was right. It was something that he brought up, I believe, unsolicited, and yet he seems to be taking this in stride. But again, that could be a cultural thing. It's going to be something that also, the way it was phrased to me when I talked to people around the team earlier this week, was that it's not necessarily a long-term thing either in terms of this arrangement with Bruno starting and Sengun coming off the bench. Just because they start the season this way doesn't mean that that's how it's going to look a month from now or 2 months from now or after the deadline. So that's something to keep in mind as well. This could be something of sort of a transition phase in which they're trying to get him more used to playing with at least one of those two high usage guards. And perhaps in the middle part of the season, they feel more comfortable taking the training wheels entirely off and saying, hey, let's see how you do balancing your game with both of these high usage guards when they're playing all three at the same time. And of course, they could close games together and close halves together, but by letting Bruno start in the first and third quarters, then you're really taking away those first 6 minutes where you'd have sort of that crunch. It just strikes me as a little bit odd because I actually commented during that preseason opener against San Antonio, I thought they looked really good. And even with all three on the floor, it looked like the offense was running through Sengun and they looked great. And the Rockets won by 38. But I guess the counter to all of that is that the Spurs are absolutely garbage and that there's nothing you can really take out of a preseason game against the Spurs, right?
I will just tell you that I watched a large portion of the Hornets Spurs game on opening night, which is time I will never get back. And in my notes is written, this may be the worst team I've ever seen, including the 2012 Bobcats. Like it is bad. Where I was like, I don't know how many NBA guys I can find on this roster. Like they have done an incredible job setting themselves up for Wembanyama. So yeah, like this is a lot of it is just trying to find the. You know, I think that a lot of this is. I think a lot of teams are going to look very good versus San Antonio this year.
Something else about Sengun, which is, I think this is a move. What if this is a move for Sengun himself? And we know that the priority for the Rockets this season, even though they'll say in press conference that they want to win more, right? The priority is development, at least for this year, with Wemby and Scoot and such a good draft class, and it being the last year that they own their own pick. If this is the development year, does it not make sense to, well, first of all, let's maximize Sengun's minutes where he is the offensive hub. And that will come with him with the second unit, because in the first unit, KPJ and Jalen are always going to be ahead. I think organizationally, they're probably ahead anyways. And so those are going to be your first two options, which means most of the time when Sengun's playing with those two, he's going to be more of your normal pick and roll center in the league, right? And so if you want to maximize the bench minutes that Sengun has with the second unit, Silas runs the second unit as a lot of NBA teams do, basically from the 8-9 minute mark in the first quarter until the first bit of the second quarter, and then again in the final of the third quarter and beginning of the fourth. If you're going to give Sengun those minutes, the extra minutes he gets, and that usually amounts to about 16 minutes. The extra 10 minutes that he's going to get have to come with the starters. And having those minutes come with the starters is harder if you start him compared to if you bring him off the bench. Because if you start him and you play him the first 5 minutes, you bring him off and for 2 or 3 minutes, and you bring him back on to come with the bench unit. Out of the first 16 minutes of the game, Sengun's going to play like 13 of them. And then he's going to go the end of the second, the beginning of the third, without playing, and then come on again at the later part of the third into the fourth, right? And this is if you want him to play closing minutes, because apparently he didn't last game, which was surprising to me. But I value the closing minutes more than actually being a starter, because being a starter is just, it doesn't mean that much. And so from that perspective, if the priority is he's going to play with the bench, it's easier to maximize his minutes if he's not starting. because of balancing and because I think it's better if he plays 13 out of the last 16 minutes of a half rather than the beginning of it, because after that he's going to halftime and he gets time to recover. Stamina was one of the issues that people brought up in his rookie season. And then about him not being mad about coming off the bench, I don't think he would be, because with Turkey, and we watched a lot of Sengun with the Turkish national team, he came off the bench playing. He started some, but he also came off the bench playing. And if he's okay with it, if we're approaching this from a perspective of let's maximize shot creating reps as the first option for all three of our shot creating prospects, which are Jalen, KPJ, and Sengun, then it makes a little bit more sense. Where this is a disconnect from reality is the fact that, well, he played 22 minutes and he didn't close the game. So that's where it kind of disconnects from reality. I kind of theorized that the goal would be to do what I said before, but they didn't do it the first game. So I guess I'm looking forward to tonight to seeing what they do.
Yeah, I would just, I think if we look at last year and the performance, and this showed on tape as well, like everybody's gonna be better with Eric Gordon. Like that's just, he's the guy that knows the NBA the best. He like knows how to play the best. But the three-man lineups of Gordon, KPJ, and Sengun had a 110 offensive rating. They also had a 100 defensive rating, but that's probably noise. But that plus 10.4, to me, what you kind of look at when you look at the lineup combinations and the on-offs with Sengun is, like, I would argue a little bit against it, which is like your bench really needs a creator on that second unit. Who cares? Like, it's okay if your bench gets obliterated. An optimal outcome for this season would be that the starters are like a -2 and the bench is like a -15 and you lose and you get a high draft pick. That's a great outcome, especially if the starters have an offensive rating that's like in the top 15 to top 10. Like that would be an optimum outcome for Houston, because it's like, look, we can cook offensively. We just need to get the guys seasoned, add one more piece, and then we're good to go. And that would allow, even if you're in the lottery but you don't get Scoop or Wembanyama, you're able to, whether it's Nick Smith or whoever else, you add another component and you've got all these guys. Jabari, I think, adds a little bit of a twist to this, and that's fair. But especially for a guy like Sengun, who's a connector, and that's the best thing that he's probably going to be in the NBA. He's not going to be a volume scorer. He's not going to be a dominant post-up presence. He's going to be a connector, and those are really valuable. Those are guys that help you win games. The best thing to do is to put that guy with your other key important pieces, so that these guys that don't necessarily have, like, Jabari needs a connector, and I honestly think Jalen and KPJ need a connector. And so putting a high-level post, like pinch post connector in there, makes a lot of sense. And so going against it, the only real outcome the only real way I can see this is that this is either, it's got to be a firm belief in a deficiency in Sengun on one end of the floor or the other. And if it's something like you're talking about where it's like a maximization, then you're maximizing like the raw, it's like a galaxy brain approach. It feels very much to me like it's overthinking it. This could work even, but there's a problem. Isn't it bad if it works? If your starters are good with Bruno Fernando, isn't that a problem? Because you still have this really talented player on the bench unit who's not able to reach his max potential. Ben made a good point about what they gave up for him. What I mean by like they invested in him is they did make a choice to be like, we're going to, at least make a small negative to target this guy. And so there's a level of investment there. And to me, the overall comprehensive picture just makes me kind of tilt my head once again at a decision that Silas has made.
That's fair. Anyway, we're halfway through the episode, so let's transition to the much bigger fish and what we promised when we brought Matt on this podcast, which is a Jalen Green discussion. And as a reminder, we're recording this midday Friday, so we have not seen the back-to-back yet. Memphis on Friday night, Milwaukee Saturday night. So it's possible that performances in those games may change the perspective a little bit. As of now, Jalen's coming off 16 points in the opener in Atlanta, but he struggled to shoot, just 1 of 7 from 3. He did play very, very well in the preseason, over 22 points a game, over 3 assists, over 43% from 3. And of course, we know how he finished last season. And we brought Matt on because, of course, Matt made some waves last week when he hosted Locked On NBA. It was after the Rockets-Miami exhibition game. He had on the Locked On NBA, or the Locked On Heat host, to join the Locked On NBA show. And Matt asked him his impressions about Jalen after watching that exhibition, and specifically whether he thought that Jalen would turn into an impactful winning player in the league. The Heat expert said basically no, that he looked at him as a potential high-scoring six-man type, that's how he was trending, which of course Rockets fans took that very personally, given how great Jalen looked at the end of last season, and in the preseason he looked very well. Still waiting to see that in the regular season. Hopefully that happens this weekend. Matt, I think one of the things, before we even go into the X's and O's of the conversation and the points that we may agree or disagree on, I know it bothered you that people were making a huge deal out of this 30-second clip that was posted to Twitter as opposed to the full context of the conversation. So for people who only saw that 30-second video that went viral, and that may include Jalen himself, because Jalen had a tweet that morning about people judging him who haven't played basketball, something along those lines. And he didn't say that it was in reference to that, but it sure seemed awfully coincidental if it wasn't.
So let me give you a little bit of context, just so we're sure that it was about that. The guy that posted the clip, he's in the group chat in a Rockets Twitter group chat, and he sent a screenshot of, and people have Jalen on notifications also saw the same thing. Jalen retweeted that clip 5 minutes before he made that tweet. He just then retweeted because he didn't want to,
Ooh.
So it was about that.
So it was definitely about that. Okay. Matt, I know it bothered you, that clip being taken out of context. What are people missing that have only seen that 30-second version?
I think the big thing here is, one, it's just like rage bait. And I'm not, I just don't find our show to be necessarily of that line. Like, it's just, I get real upset when there's this, everyone just wants to throw out, like, that's just a hot take. That's okay. That's usually code for you don't like it. I hate this narrative. That means you don't like it. Like, that really is the core of it. The context was like, I was like, look, are you buying or selling Jalen Green? Because I thought it'd be an interesting question after he watched that game. And based off of, and honestly, David's usually he's pretty even keeled. And so the broader conversation in that was about the range of outcomes. Like, there's just a wider range of outcomes for most players than with young guys that fans want to accept. Like that, and especially when, like, look, I'm okay with getting dragged into it. I was on the show, right? And I'm not like yelling at David like, you're an idiot, like Rockets fans want. So like, I'm okay with getting dragged into it to a certain degree. It was weird to me that like this is being made into like a my thing when I'm like, guys, my answer was very clear on it, which is I don't know. And that may not be enough for Rockets fans to be like, you should know he's going to be a 5-time All-Star. Okay. But again, range of outcomes. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen guys go from potential All-Star to six-man. I've seen them go from potential All-Star to out of the league. And I've seen the opposite. I've seen guys go from two-way player to stars. It happens all the time. Like, the variance on these things is often very wild. And from Jalen's perspective, after I did the whole podcast with Ben over the summer, and like I did a deep dive, and I wind up being higher on Jalen than I was, while also having concerns. I also think that one of the things that was really frustrating was this idea that 30-second clip encapsulates the entirety of the beliefs on these things and how much is filled in the blanks. But more than anything, it's really this. It's okay for us to disagree. Like, the sentiment that like this is ridiculous, it's uninformed, ignorant was a term that was used. All of these type of things, because you don't like the outcome. You don't need to spend your day translating in your head, person said thing I don't agree with about a player I like, into this person is the dumbest human being on the planet and has no idea what he's talking about. When, like, I'm sorry, like, it was in my case at least, like, I'm watching these games every night. I spent literally 10 days doing nothing but like Rockets clips. And after my eyes stopped bleeding, I went on with Ben and did a whole podcast about it. And so, look, aggregation's part of it. I get it. I particularly get annoyed though when it's like part of a broader conversation about a not that important topic, and it's like, look at this, insert word here, to try and generate that. It's just for me, it's not especially when you're not going to link to it. You're not even going to give people the opportunity to be like, wait, what do you actually say here? Like that to me is a low blow and really uncalled for.
It's a combination of it being you, with it being a take that's been going around for not only about Jalen, but for a few years now, and shifting it from making it about you and making it about the topic at hand, which is kind of Jalen. I think this concept of scoring guard on a bad team is putting up empty stats. And I'm not gonna believe him or that guard until he does it on a winning team, and just kind of like discarding it as, oh, it's just another guy putting up stats on a bad team, is really outdated and is generalized to more players than deserve it. And I'll get into what I said. Originally, this moniker it's about guys that are, scoring 25, or not 25 points a game, because people don't score 25 points a game. That's an overused thing as well. But guys scoring 20 points a game, but his efficiency sucks and he can't defend, and he's like a 6'1" guard, a 6'1" shooting guard. I'm kind of describing Colin Sexton, but forget about that. That's doing it on a bad team, and because of that, he doesn't have the potential compared, or I don't predict him to reach the heights that this guy, also on a bad team, that's not being efficient, but on the other end is a better playmaker. I'm going to rate him lower than this guy solely because he's a scoring archetype. And we've seen it with Trae Young to some extent when he was on those terrible Atlanta teams. Devin Booker is another example of this. And my point is, when we look at Jalen Green, right, we see the tools there. We see on the court, he is doing it efficiently for the second half of the season. We are seeing a guy that cares, and if you watch them, he cares about the defensive end. It's not just a guy that's going out there and just putting up shots and going home. And it's a guy that's shown legitimate flashes playmaking-wise, which you gave him credit for. My question is, why is it so easy to label, especially scoring shooting guards, as, oh, this guy, if I don't believe in this guy to the moon, he's going to be a 6-man?
This to me encapsulates a huge problem with modern day Twitter, which is honestly, it's player fetishization. It's like, no, he's good. It's just a narrative that he puts empty stats. Like, we've seen this throughout the course of NBA history, of guys that can get numbers on bucket that don't contribute in a meaningful way towards the game and the impact of winning. To win an NBA game, you need two things. You need impact and you need production. Okay. Without the other, you can't do it. If you had a team of all PJ Tuckers, you're not winning anything because you're not going to be able to score enough. You need those production guys. Devin Booker, I will argue, was a guy that was chasing numbers, was a guy that was inefficient, was a guy that was putting together that his play was more about his individual scoring efforts than it was about the team, because he didn't know any better. It just needed time. And the same thing I think is true with Jalen. But where we go wrong is the idea of, like you said, like, well, we see the tools. Okay. The same things you can be said about veterans, but nobody ascribes star status or rejects the idea of them becoming stars because they're older. If they're young, it's like, well, in time, they'll definitely get there. No, they won't. How many guys do we see wash out in the NBA? Not everybody makes it. And that's okay. And so this idea of, well, you said that about Devin Booker, and now look at him. Okay, Devin Booker's surrounded by a bunch of impactful guys. And Devin Booker made the strides in passing and in defense to become that player. I will tell you with complete certainty that Devin Booker is a different player in terms of his impact than he was when he was putting up 70, when he was just getting buckets. It's not the same guy. And that's okay. And you can say, like, it's totally fair to be like, look, I don't expect Jalen to be there yet. Neither do I. Like, I don't expect Jalen to be there yet. It's the second season. He's so young. He's so inexperienced. But if you have a question of which types of players do that, because it's not like all young players do that. And I know this is going to rub Rockets fans the wrong way, but I'm sorry. Cade Cunningham plays in a way where I look at him and I go, like, that guy's going to impact winning. Like, I have zero doubt that Cade Cunningham's going to impact winning because he navigates the offense. He plays efficient basketball. the defense is a lot higher, even if Jalen's effort is there. Like everything about Jalen's scoring high in the NBA is going to be higher by a magnitude than Cade's. But if you ask me which player is going to be more impactful in 5 years, right now I'm going to say Cade. That doesn't mean that it's 100% solid, but there's this pushback, and all it really is, Paolo, I'm sorry, but all it really is it's a counter narrative. It's, all these people just say that there's empty stats, and that's just blanketly not true. There are definitely cases where I think people can look at a guy and say, oh, he's just putting up numbers, he's not doing anything to winning, when that player actually is. Maybe Jalen is that. I'm not sitting here saying that I know enough about the Rockets to be able to say that yes or no. I will tell you that the film work I did not reveal that. I don't look at Jalen and go like, yeah, that's a really impactful player. I think he's going to be like a winner in this league. It doesn't mean that I'm like, he's always going to be a loser and he's going to be a six man, right? I will also say on the six man point, though, a lot of guys in that role that are best suited there, that's where like they do transition to those kind of specialized scorer roles. I think Jalen's better than that. I think Jalen's always going to be a little bit better than that role. But if he was on a team that was stacked with like, real high impact players and the best role for him was off the bench, then I wouldn't be shocked at it. It would not be completely surprising. So I understand that everybody wants to believe that every young player is going to be great, but they're not. And it's okay to be open to the range of outcomes on these players.
Listen, I'm not saying it's guaranteed that Jalen's going to be great.
But that's the tone.
Right. So let me explain a bit further then. What I'm saying is, if you are a scoring guard and that prototype in general, you're given a lot less leeway for your shortcomings than basically any other archetype in the
let me respond to that. Did we say this about Klay Thompson?
What do you mean?
We didn't say that about Klay Thompson. Klay was a pure shooter scoring guard when he came into the league, and immediately, like nobody was like, "Oh, Klay's just going to put up empty points." Like that was not the sentiment.
No, but let's look at Cade for example, and I love Cade. I think he was I had him number one on my board. It's not one of those things where it's because I'm a Rockets fan I think Jalen's going to be better than Cade. Let's look at Cade, right? Great player. I see the four general capabilities. I see the pacing of the game. I see the defensive potential that is there, right? At the same time, I also see a guy that's more than likely, if he is to reach his full potential, going to need the ball in his hands. And so one of the obstacles to doing that is, well, you need to be an efficient scorer to be the lead ball handler, right? Cade has not been an efficient scorer so far. I mean, he was, fourth true shooting percentage below what Jalen is? Why is it a given that Cade develops that scoring potential, but it's a lot more doubtful that Jalen can become a better defender? And it doesn't need to be an elite defender. It just needs to be good enough for his scoring to make him stay on the floor if he can do more than score and he can play make, because we all know that just pure scoring is not enough.
I mean, I think it's a fair question. I kind of reject your premise though. Like you're like, he needs to be an efficient scorer. Why? Because Steph Curry is? Like that's not. I think that again.
How does he not?
Because he had 10 assists the other night. And that combined with the defense, there's so many ways for you to be impactful in the basketball game still without. Now, if you're like, look, there's just a gap here between not as efficient and Russell Westbrook in 2017 and beyond, right? Like or 18 and beyond. There's a gap there. Like we can agree on that, yes?
Between what Cade was last season and that?
No, Cade was, if you look at Cade, look at the first like 4 months of the season or 2 months of the season rather, the Pistons as a whole, like they had like a 1940s offense. Like the shooting was so bad. Like I had no other way to look at it than this is so bad, it's unsustainably bad. And I never say that. Like it was horrific. And no, and you're right. The question's a fair one, right? Of why is there an assumption that he'll be an efficient scorer versus why Jalen won't be a good defender? And a lot of that comes in, like mine, a lot of it comes into the frame. Like I don't know that Jalen's frame is ever, like he's got length, but I'm not sure that the frame is ever going to allow him to. And here's the other thing is Pala's like, again, a lot of this is based off of experience. And so you can reject it. It's okay if you want to reject this based off of all the other guys you've seen are not Jalen and Jalen is different snort emoji, right? That's fine. But like we've seen a lot of players with Jalen's build, with Jalen's profile, with Jalen's game, not become good defensive players. We've seen a lot of players in Cade's mold become at least average efficiency. It's possible neither of them are good. Like it's entirely possible. But does that track in terms of why there's that kind of bias there that's built off of a longer sample size and not taking Jalen as an individualistic, beautiful unicorn type player?
You gave Cade the benefit of the doubt when it comes to Detroit's offense was not good. I'll call it that just so I don't say anything I shouldn't say. And so because of that, he was horrible, right? But you watched the Rockets. And you saw how bad it was. And you saw how Jalen Green, for a lot of the season, had to sit in the corner and shoot threes or come off a dribble handoff where there's no advantage created, and he's shooting a deep three. And we saw halfway through the season, for half a season, Jalen Green was shooting 47, 39, 79 splits.
But why does that only matter? Why? Let me ask you, why, when we know the back half of the season, I'll just tell you, the back half of the season is a mess in the NBA. It's just a mess. So many guys are hurt. So many teams are tanking. So many teams are resting. Like, the players are zoned out. March is a death slog, right? And it's not that I throw out that out. And I talked about this with Ben. Like, I think it's meaningful. But listen to how you're talking about it. You're like, sure, he struggled early on, but that wasn't his fault. But when he was good, that's what matters.
No, I'm applying the same logic, though, as you said with Cade. He was bad early on, and that's the Pistons. And then
no. I'll be very clear on this. Like, if Cade had finished the year the way that he did, I would have very little upside, like very little. I would have serious concerns. And if Jalen had finished the season the way that he started, I would have had serious concerns, right? So my thing has been, I don't know that I don't know. I'll tell you, like, I do not know that Jalen is, or that Cade is going to be a more impactful player than Jalen in 5 years. Like, I'm telling you that here. Like, if you told me Jalen Green becomes a 3-time All-Star, a winning player, way more impactful, I would not be like, that's insane. That's crazy talk, right? Because Cade's offense was that bad. Like, totally fair. But based off of, I will say, like, some of this is shot selection. Like, there is a little bit of shot selection built into this. Can we agree that Jalen's shot selection sometimes is perilous?
Yes, but okay, he forces up shots, right? That's something that got better as the year went on, but he does force deep threes because the offense can. I'll blame it on the offense again.
No,
I'll give you that.
You don't have to, like, we don't have to, like, redirect everything to it not being his fault. It's okay for, this is what I'm saying. It's okay for Jalen to have deficiencies. They don't determine his future. It's okay it's great for Jalen to have tools. It doesn't determine his future 100%.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. And I agree with you that we don't know. What I'm saying is, from the get-go, I still believe, and this is one of those things we will just have to agree to disagree. I from the get-go, I believe that scoring shooting guards usually get a lot less leeway for their flaws than other players do. Just in general.
Because they get paid. Because they, honestly, a lot of it's like they don't have, this is like the league context stuff. And maybe Jalen's different. I am saying this. Maybe Jalen's different. The agents and trainers tell them that if they get buckets, they get paid, which is true. If you score 25 points a game, you're getting paid. You're going to have a 10-year career in the NBA, and at this point, you're going to make like $400 million. That's insane. What's the best way for you to maximize those types of things in order to get that contract? Well, maybe don't care as much on defense, right? Like, take a few plays off. Don't worry about those other things. Don't worry about the hustle plays. Like, if you focus on just getting buckets, you're going to make $400 million and you're going to get sponsorship deals and you're going to be a star. Like, this is an inherent thing in the NBA. I do not know if Jalen is wired that way, because Jalen may be like, yeah, but if we don't win, I don't care. I want to win, right? If, like, you believe he's wired that way, I would assume.
And people in the organization do too. I can promise you that. The people in the org behind the scenes rave about how much this kid wants to win. It was killing him last year. This is how it was relayed to me, that he was inefficient, because the last thing he wants to do is be, a volume scorer. He wants to do it within the team concept. He put on weight very diligently this offseason to make sure that it was done in the right way. He is very team oriented in his approach. And it's not just, not that a team would ever say, wow, this guy is just really, really selfish and just wants to get paid. But I'm just telling you, Matt,
Yeah.
behind the scenes, they rave about the fact that he really gets it. Does
Right,
that
so
move
that's
the needle
important.
at all?
It does. Like, that's important context. Again, reinforcing the idea of we don't know. And one of the things I'll say is I'm not negating that. It's that it further puts it into, if he stays that path, then he's going to be an impactful player. And with his efficiency and playmaking ability, he can be as impactful or more impactful than Cade or Evan Mobley or whoever. Like, he can be one of those guys. One of the gaps here is that people that are younger and cover the league and cover the young guys are always like, so that's what's going to happen. And after you do this, you're like, no, there's a lot of times when they start out that way, and then for whatever reason, their attitude shifts. That changes. That doesn't mean I'm not saying it's going to, right? I'm saying that I can't make these projections on these players based off of like these kind of assumptions. And if you say, like, you just did that with Cade, right? You're right in that, like, you have to have some sort of projection of where you think these guys are going to be. Like, there's a range that you should try and build in, and you can have these opinions.
Yeah.
Good.
So you've covered the league obviously for a lot longer than I have. I'll ask you the question then. You watched Jalen Green play. I was really surprised by watching a 20-year-old on his rookie season, down 20 in the last 15 games of the season, actually fighting through screens, for example. Did you notice that?
Yes, I actually did. His defense was not, you're right that there's like the defensive tools are there, and like the effort level I think is there. Again, the younger guys tend to play a little harder because they got more energy, and then the money hasn't really kicked in for them. And that's not to say again that it won't change anything. Like, again, if he's, I'll say this. Let me just ask you, Pallet. Do you think right now that he is a net plus in terms of like winning? If you took Jalen Green and you put him on, I'm trying to think of a decent team, Chicago. Let's say you took Zach LaVine off and you put Jalen Green on. Are they going to be able to win at the same kind of rate that they have, which is not a great team?
No.
Okay.
No, they're not.
And it's because of the inexperience in large part, right?
Yeah. It's because of the turnovers. It's because, when you're on actually a winning team, you're going to be targeted if you are the odd man out at any facet of your game.
I think Zach LaVine is a great example of what we're talking about on both ends of this, where Zach LaVine in Minnesota was logged as exactly what you've kind of railed against, right? The shooting guard that doesn't contribute to winning. Do you think that Zach LaVine played differently when he got to Chicago than he did in Minnesota?
I didn't watch him in Minnesota, but before you conclude, I wanted to reverse the question. Do you think if you put Cade in Chicago instead of, I don't know, call it DeRozan, do you think that he contributes to winning right now? Because I don't think he does.
I do. I think that they're not as good. Okay, so they win fewer games, but the Bulls win more games with Cade for DeRozan than with Jalen for LaVine. That would be my thought on it, because Cade helps defensively, which is like DeRozan's a zero there. Cade's a really high level floor manager, and he's able to set the offense. It'd be easier for him with more offensive weapons, so he's going to get easier scoring opportunities and maybe settle in. If you're right, and he's just not like, if you're right that he's not an efficient scorer, and you don't necessarily project him to be, right? Then
no, I project him to be.
Okay.
I believe in Cade, but I'm just saying, like, right now he has a lot of the questions, questions just as important as Jalen has.
The key point that you're making is really sound here. It's a great point, Val, which is like, I'm always kind of stressing that you can talk about the good things with the players, but it's okay to talk about the negative things with the players without saying that they're always going to be that. But you also shouldn't assume that they're not always going to be that. And so with Cade, it presents an equal concern here, where if he is truly a 40% field goal shooter, if he's truly a sub 50% EFG shooter, then that is going to severely cap what he is going to be able to accomplish in the NBA, right? Like, that's not you saying that he's going to be, but if we're going to point out these problems with Jalen, we need to be honest and not excuse the bad things about Cade because of the perception of him, and then only focus on his positives while we only focus on the negatives with Jalen. and ignore the positives. You're absolutely right. Like, it's got to be holistic, and there's got to be a wide range of outcomes here, which is they can move past these problems, and Cade can become an efficient shooter, and Jalen can become a player that thinks about what shot he's taking at any point in the game ever. And also like limit the turnovers and those types of things. Like, the defensive side is really interesting here because with Jabari being such a tough dude, there's a capacity here for Houston. Like I talked about with Ben, I thought the Houston's defensive upside might be better than their offense, which was a thing I was not expecting when I started doing the film work. I think there's real tools defensively here. And that's an area where Jalen's game can make a real impact, and he doesn't have to shift anything about his offensive approach. If he's just like a plus defender with his scoring ability, that's more than enough for him to be a winning and impactful player.
So, a technique point. Paolo and I were talking just before you came on, Matt, offline in this chat, and we were talking about the Atlanta game and how much better Jalen looked against Trae Young than KPJ did. Specifically at the point of attack, there was one sequence that went viral early in the game where Jalen stayed with him when he was trying to step back from 27 feet, blocked it, got a transition run out for a dunk. And specifically with his combination of shiftiness, quickness, and now he is a little bit stronger, he has that length. Does the fact that he is potentially capable of defending ones as well, does that build the case for him potentially being an impactful defender, that he's not just your run-of-the-mill wing who you look at as a guy on 2s and 3s, but he's legitimately someone that can defend ones? And in this current construct, even if KPJ is your one, KPJ is tall enough that he can conceivably be a guy that covers the wing. If you look at Jalen as someone that's a lot shiftier than the standard archetype for, I suppose, a 6'5" high scoring guard, does that add to his long-term defensive upside?
Oh yeah. I also think, Paul, we can. I want to get your thoughts on this. I'll ask you something in a second. But when I watched his off-screen work, we talked about him fighting through screens and things like that. He was really, really good at tracking, right? So guys are running him off of back screens and double screens, and he was bursting through and really fighting to get through and staying attached on off-ball movement. One of the primary things that is most important if you're going to be a guard in the NBA, it's not about can you guard point guards because they're just going to run pick and roll at you. The question is, can you get over the screen enough to help out in drop coverage? Now, this is interesting because I actually think Alperen Sengun, who we project as like the future of the Rockets still, I think is going to be a terrible drop defender. I think he's going to be really good. The numbers showed last year he was shockingly good on switches, and I was like, there's no way. So I pulled up all the clips, and I was like, he's not bad. Wow, okay, he's really good actually on switches. I think he's good at the level, right? And those things can make it easier. And so if you can kind of scheme that way, it'll help. But Jalen's probably not going to play with Alperen for the duration of his career. It just doesn't happen that way. And if that's not going to be the case, Jalen's got to be able to get over those high pick and roll situations. It's not necessarily all that different from off-ball screens. It's a little bit different just in terms of the motion and the movement. And guys have talked about that, about the different types of burst and physicality, especially the screens are oftentimes way, way, way stronger at the point of attack and pick and roll. But if he can help in those situations, let me put it this way. If you're just a high scoring, efficient guard that absolutely murders getting over screens and contesting from the backside and drop coverage, you will have a long NBA career and you will be a very impactful player. Like, that absolutely matters. But it's less about can you keep up with ones, and it's way more about honestly, can you handle that initial pick and roll coverage action? The numbers were really bad last year, which totally fine. I don't know any young scoring guards, let me put it that way, that are great at that. Like, it's like Herb Joneses are the only guys that are good at that, where they're freaks in nature. But those are the type of things that I think are more important than being able to guard ones in isolation. It's about, can you navigate pick and roll and help effectively? Because if you can help and drop coverage, it makes everybody's life a lot easier.
Yeah, I think the Rockets in general make terrible decisions when it comes to when they're wanting to go over or under the screens. Like, yeah, I'm fresh off of this game against Atlanta, and I cannot tell you how many times I went over on screens on the DeJounte Murray, and I was tearing my hair out. And they're going to play Ja Morant today, and I bet you they're going to go over on most of the screens. I'm going to tear my hair out again. But I think he needs a little bit of coaching, but I think he's shifty enough he should be able to. You said he's lengthy. He's not actually that lengthy. He's 6'7" wingspan, but it's okay. It's not negative wingspan or anything, but it's not, anything crazy plus like Eric Gordon or someone like that. But The other thing I was going to point out is, and we know tracking is NBA tracking data is not great,
Right.
but he did rank as, I think it was 89th percentile ISO defender, which you just brought up. ISO is not everything, but that's
It helps.
encouraging. And the other thing that I was going to bring up is a lot of the times when we talk about these scoring guards, they're usually, and maybe this is a little bit of damage from watching James Harden for so long, but they're usually really good on the ball, and off the ball they don't care. And something that makes me really confident that Jalen will be a contributor in a lot of different types of offense is the fact that he moves off the ball a lot. And he uses that athleticism a lot. And not the biggest fan of Stephen Silas, everybody knows it. But the one thing I give him credit for is through his, what most fans would call mismanagement of having Jalen play off the ball so much early on, Jalen, and some of it was from his coaches, his personal coaches, just looking at interviews from it. But one of the things that he did develop is he cares about playing off the ball, and it's not James Harden type. Oh, be ready to shoot. No, I mean actually being proactive and constantly relocating, constantly looking for the pockets that are open for you to get your own shot. And I think that's something that really shined through second half of the season as compared to the beginning of the season. That's the development that he did make. I think that's one of those things that helps me believe that he's going to be someone who's going to be a contributor as his career goes on. Because it's not a nice old dude that if he doesn't have the ball in his hands, it's basically worth it. No, I think he's someone who's going to be able to contribute off the ball as a plus, not just a guy that stands and catches and shoots or attacks closeouts.
You know what's funny though is, so again, these guys are not Jalen. Jalen's not these guys. Like, they're two different individuals. But like, this is a good example of it. James Harden was a great off-ball mover when he was with OKC. Like, it was so great, and things changed with a variety of reasons, right? Russell Westbrook, people do not believe me when I say this. Russell Westbrook used to be a really good defender early in the career. He fought through screens. He really, he moved, he was chasing. He was athletic. He would make these plays that were just incredible. And he stayed pretty sound. So this is a good reminder of the, and you say that to somebody now and they're like, I don't believe you. And so it's not that Jalen is destined to become that. It's an example of an overall trend that has held true. If Jalen bucks that, then Jalen's going to be great. It's on Jalen. This is all on Jalen's side. My general point in all this is to say that you can have these beliefs, and they're well-reasoned beliefs. You've done the work. They're not just I think he's gonna be awesome because I'm a Rockets fan. These are great points you're making. I think it's important to at least be open to and be accepting of yes, but, which are built on a broader look at the league, not just a microcosm of Jalen's career, and an overall sense of how these things can develop, but not necessarily will.
I think that's fair. And one point that I want to make, you had a tweet that I think was somewhat tongue-in-cheek, in which you contrasted the Thunder fan approach to their rebuild with the Rocket fan approach. And basically what you said was the Thunder were skeptical, even with all their draft picks, as to whether the rebuild would work at all, whereas the Rockets fans think that every single young player they have, or at least the four potentially blue chip ones, Jalen, KPJ, Sengun, and now Jabari, will all be top 10 players 5 years from now. I know where you were going with that. And, I can be snarky on Twitter too. I get it. But I think the reality of it, Matt, is that for most Rockets fans, not all, I mean, we've got a few idiots, every fan base does, but
Sure.
Most reasonable Rockets fans, I think, view the team as currently constructed. There's a lot of nice prospects, but even including Jabari Smith, there's only one player on this roster right now that they believe truly has the potential to be a top 10 player, the alpha on a legit championship contender, and that's Jalen. And that's why fans are very defensive about him when it comes to criticism. And I think, you probably do get that, but I saw that tweet and I just wanted to push back because I think for most Rockets fans, there's a huge gulf between those other guys and Jalen, because Jalen is the one guy that if you look hard enough, you can see the tools there to potentially be the alpha engine on a championship team one day. Not saying it's going to happen. You're right. There's a ton of ifs to get there, but he has a gear that I'm not sure anybody else, even Jabari, has. And so that's why Rockets fans are a little bit defensive on these points. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It totally makes sense. I think I found that out pretty early because like I think it's Jabari. Like
Interesting.
I think Jabari is that guy. And I found out very early that everybody's like nobody in Houston, or not nobody in Houston. I got a strong reaction on Twitter. That's the best way to put it. I got a strong reaction on Twitter that like, why would Jabari be better than Jalen? Which is I think really interesting.
He might early in his career, for the record, just because of the two-way production. I could see, especially the first 2 or 3 years, Jabari having the set of tools that makes him, especially in terms of contributing to winning, more immediately impactful than Jalen. I completely see where you would be coming from on that front. I guess the way I look at it, and the reason I tilt towards Jalen, is the upside scenario 5 years from now. Does Jabari have the creation ability to potentially be that guy leading a championship team? I hope he develops into that. There's a report this week that he's 7 foot in shoes now. That would certainly help, even if he's doesn't have a ton of wiggle to his game in terms of creating off the dribble, doesn't have a great handle at this point. If he can just rise and fire over guys the way that Kevin Durant does, and he has a great jump shot, then you can overcome some of that stuff. I hope that happens. But the way I look at it right now, it's easier for me to envision 5 years from now Jalen being the alpha, at least on offense, than Jabari. Now, if you want to go into defense and two-way play, then there's more of a balanced discussion. But I think that's where Rockets fans sort of tilt towards Jalen. It's not so much about Jalen being better than Jabari in the 2 to 3 years. It's about trying to project out to 5 years when this team is actually trying to push for a title.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's like if you look at the model, you're like, but he, can't dribble, can't create it on his own. And I look at him like, well, I think he can probably develop the dribble stuff. It's tougher. It is like the handle's a concern, I think. But I'm like, look, if you give me a 7-foot Carmelo Anthony that defends, that's a really great player. And that's based off of and that's after like I'm one of the lowest guys on Carmelo's career that you will find. Never believed in him, didn't think he's overrated historically, et cetera, but like that's an incredible player. If you pair him with a point guard, I don't know, Scoot Henderson, I think you really maybe like you got something. And I think that's like that combination of players with the defensive impact is really important. And so, look, defense is structural more than it is individual. I believe that. I think there are very few cases, like Rudy Gobert, obviously, but there are very few cases of one defensive player making a defense. But I do like the way that Jabari plays in terms of being able to contribute in multiple ways, a little bit more than Jalen. But again, I think Jalen has there's a definite upside there, and I'm very open to being wrong on all these points, and that this all looks like that. All my skepticism looks absurd in 4 years, but it doesn't mean that skepticism isn't warranted now.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Jabari versus Jalen, maybe the fan base is still a little bit behind because Paolo was the guy for so long. But I would say you said defense is more structural and it's harder to have an impact as an individual player. I think Jabari is someone very unique in the sense that he can break that structure. He is someone with the size to play the 5 eventually. Not right now because he's still too skinny, I would say. But I think you look at him as you projected him to be great as a taller Carmelo Anthony with defense. I think if you ask most of Rockets Twitter, if their projection of Jabari being great is more of a Bam Adebayo with a jump shot type of greatness, right? And so from that perspective, I think they both have a good chance of being the most important player for the team. But I mean, it's just easier to envision a guy that's, a bucket becoming the first option, even if sometimes he might not be the most impactful guy. And Jabari is really special, and I was someone who wanted Paolo early on the entire way through. But I think Jabari can be really important for this team in transitioning towards winning, because he seems to be a guy that demands more out of other people. And if he can become that defensive leader on a rebuilding team, because we often see rebuilding teams have plenty of offense, and it's just that. It's plenty of offense, and at the end of the day, you end up not transitioning into a contender because you don't get that defensive side of the ball from a culture standpoint really aligned. And I think Jabari and Tari can be that for us. And he might be a really important piece in the way that it transforms us in 2-3 years from a team that's, hopeful rebuilding team with a lot of offensive talent to a team that actually can hang on the defensive end, and some of it goes to the Jalen as well. But I like that. I like to think of it in that, kind of dynamic of, okay, Jalen is our main offensive guy. He's like our star. We think this guy's going to be a star, and Jabari is like, this is our main defensive guy. He's going to demand more out of everybody else, and he himself is very unique in the sense that he can switch. Like, his ability to switch is really, really special. It's not only just for the size, just special in general. The way he can play up on guys rather than wait for them to come at him on the perimeter is really special for a guy his size, and I hope that stays there as he bulks up a little bit, because if he does, Bam Adebayo with a jump shot, with a 3-point shot, it's a rough comparison, but that's a damn good player.
Matt, any last words before we wind down?
Please be nice to me. Please. I'm so tired of getting abused. I'm so tired. No. Great conversation. I'm glad to be on with you guys. I appreciate most Rockets fans' feedback, and we'll see. And hopefully this will all work out, and hopefully we'll get to see some Sengun with the starters at some point, because I'd like to see that.
Sounds good. Folks, this is where we will wrap it today. For Matt and Paolo, I'm Ben. You should follow all of us on Twitter if you aren't already. Matt at HP Basketball, Paolo at Paolo Alves NBA, and me at Ben Dubose. This show, The Lager Line, brought to you by Clutch City Lager of Carbide Brewing. It now has its own handle as well, at The Lager Line on Twitter. If you aren't following, please do, because we're going to have a ticket giveaway, another one that is, for this coming Monday's game versus Utah. The ultimate tank-off, if you will, although maybe not yet, because Utah actually looks better than expected early in the season. And at this point, so do the Rockets. Let's be optimistic. They were competitive against the Hawks. So regardless of your motivations, Rockets Jazz tickets Monday night will be given away later today at The Lager Line and throughout the weekend. Again, thanks to Matt and Paolo for the time. Thanks to you for listening. If you're not already subscribing, go to Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Just search for The Lager Line. You can also find at The Lager Line on Twitter our link tree, and it has the direct links to all of your listening platforms of choice. Again, thanks for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of The Lager Line.